The Arizona desert was endless, an ocean of sand and stone broken only by jagged mesas that rose like ancient monuments. The sun burned fiercely above, and even the wind that swept across the plain carried no relief, only dust that stung the eyes and lips. Sarah Whitfield tugged the reins of her mule-drawn wagon, her bonnet drooping low against the heat. She had left everything familiar behind in Missouri, chasing the promise of a new life in the West. What she hadn't expected was how lonely the journey would feel. She was not entirely alone, though. Riding some miles behind had been two men from town, cowhands who had offered to escort her through Apache country, for a price. At first their presence had comforted her, but lately their glances had lingered too long. Their jokes had turned sharp and cruel, and Sarah had felt something in their company shift. Something dangerous. That shift became clear when the wagon wheel cracked on a rocky trail. As she crouched to inspect the damage, the two men came forward. Their smiles were wide, too wide. "Looks like you're in trouble, Miss Whitfield," one drawled. Before she could answer, the other stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. "Reckon you won't be needing that wagon no more." Her stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "You promised to see me safe." They laughed. Not kindly. In minutes it was done. They shoved her aside, tore through her wagon, grabbing what they could carry: food, tools, her precious chest of clothes. She fought them, but one grabbed her wrists while the other ripped the dress from her back, leaving her clutching only her thin chemise. "Stop," she screamed, her face hot with shame, but they only jeered. "Won't be needing these where you're going." They hurled her belongings into the dirt, laughing as she scrambled to gather them. Then, with her mule in tow and her dignity in tatters, they rode off, their laughter fading into the desert wind. Sarah collapsed to her knees, clutching the torn blanket they'd left behind. Humiliation burned hotter than the sun above. She wanted to cry, but tears only dried into salt on her cheeks. She was alone, stripped of clothes, wagon, and supplies. The desert offered no comfort. The horizon shimmered with heat, the sky an endless vault of blue. Vultures circled overhead as if they already knew her fate. Sarah wrapped herself in the ragged blanket and began walking. Step after step, her boots sank into the dust. Hours passed. The sun slid lower, painting the mesas in crimson light, and her throat grew raw with thirst. Every sound, every rustle of sagebrush, every distant coyote howl made her shiver. Finally, her legs gave way. She fell against a boulder, her breath ragged, her lips cracked. "God help me," she whispered. It was then she heard it, the soft thud of hooves on sand. Her heart jumped. The bandits? Had they returned? Out of the haze, a rider emerged. Tall, proud, with hair black as a raven's wing flowing loose in the wind. He sat astride a painted horse, bow slung across his back, the feather of an eagle tied in his braid. His gaze was sharp, unreadable like the desert itself. Sarah's breath caught. Apache. Every story she had heard in town came rushing back, tales of raids, ambushes, scalps. Fear prickled her skin, yet she was too weak to run. The warrior dismounted slowly, his moccasins silent on the sand. He studied her, her torn chemise, her pale skin reddened by the sun. The blanket clutched desperately around her. "You are far from your people," he said at last, his voice low, steady, accented but clear. Sarah's throat tightened. She should have been afraid, but exhaustion broke through her pride. They stole everything. My clothes, my wagon. Please." Her voice cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Please help me, Apache." For a long moment he stood in silence, his dark eyes unreadable. She feared he would turn away, leave her to die. Instead, he unfastened the blanket from his horse and draped it gently around her shoulders. The wool was rough but warm, carrying the faint scent of smoke and leather. Relief shuddered through her. She clutched the blanket tighter, fighting sobs. "Thank you." He nodded once. "My name is Taza." Sarah blinked at him, surprised. She hadn't expected a name, much less kindness. "I'm Sarah." Taza glanced at the horizon where the vultures circled. "The desert is not kind to the weak. You will not live through the night here." His words were blunt but not cruel. He extended a hand. "Come." For a moment Sarah hesitated. He was Apache, enemy, stranger, everything her people had warned her against. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she did not see the savage of rumor. She saw a man who had chosen not to leave her to the dust. Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steadying. He lifted her onto his horse. mounted behind her, and together they rode into the dying light. As the desert swallowed the last of the sun, Sarah leaned against the warmth of his chest. Too weary to question what fate awaited her, she only knew this. The outlaws had left her to die, but the Apache had given her a second chance. And for the first time since her humiliation began, hope stirred faintly in her heart. The desert night was sharp and cold, a cruel contrast to the blistering day. Wrapped in the thick wool blanket, Sarah clung to Taza's horse as it carried her across the plains. The steady rhythm of hooves and the smell of dust and leather lulled her into a half-dream, though fear kept her heart racing. She was riding into the unknown, into Apache lands, into the care of a man her people had always named enemy. When dawn broke, the sky blazed with pink and gold. In the distance, mesas rose like giants guarding the horizon. Nestled in their shadow, Sarah glimpsed movement, smoke curling upward, figures moving among scattered lodges of brush and hide. Taza's home. The camp stirred as the pair rode in, eyes turned toward them, sharp with suspicion. Women paused in their work, grinding maize or tending fires. Children darted behind their mothers' skirts, peeking out with wide, curious eyes. Warriors watched in silence, their stares heavy as stone. Sarah shrank beneath the blanket, shame heating her cheeks. She could feel their judgment, their questions. What was this pale-skinned stranger doing here, clinging to one of their own? Taza dismounted and helped her down. He said something in his language, words Sarah couldn't understand. Whatever it was, it didn't soften the looks around her. A woman with long braids stepped forward, her face lined with age but her eyes fierce. She spoke rapidly to Taza, gesturing toward Sarah. Taza's replies were calm, measured, but the woman's gaze never left Sarah. Finally, with a sharp nod, she turned and walked away. Sarah clutched the blanket tighter. They don't want me here. Taza looked down at her, his expression unreadable. They do not know you. They know only what your people have done to mine. Shame stung again, though she had never lifted a weapon against anyone. She wanted to protest, to say I'm not like them, but the words felt hollow. Instead, she followed as Taza led her to a small lodge near the edge of camp. Inside it was simple. Woven mats, clay pots, the faint smell of smoke. You will stay here, he said. Rest. You are safe. Safe. The word washed over her like cool water. She sank to the floor, exhaustion claiming her. The days that followed were hard. Sarah quickly learned that safety did not mean acceptance. The Apache women avoided her, speaking in hushed tones when she passed. Children giggled and pointed at her pale skin, whispering words she couldn't understand. The men regarded her with suspicion, their eyes sharp and cold. She tried to help where she could, fetching water from the stream, gathering firewood, but her clumsy hands betrayed her. She dropped pots, spilled water, stumbled under bundles of wood that Apache women carried with ease. Every mistake earned her quiet laughter or scornful looks. At night, she curled beneath her blanket and fought tears. She thought of home, of the wagon she'd lost, of the outlaw's cruel laughter, and always she thought of Taza. Why had he helped her at all? Taza himself was often away, scouting or hunting. But when he returned, his presence steadied her. He never mocked her struggles. Instead, he corrected her gently, showing her how to balance the water jar on her hip, how to tie the bundle of wood across her shoulders. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesas, he found her near the stream, kneeling with raw, scraped hands after spilling yet another pot of water. She bit her lip, frustration burning. I'll never be like them, she whispered. Taza crouched beside her. You are not them. You are you. She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. He dipped the pot into the stream with practiced ease, then handed it to her. Hold here, he said, adjusting her grip. Now walk slowly. Balance comes from here. He tapped her waist, not her arms. Sarah tried again, moving carefully. To her shock, the pot stayed steady. A laugh escaped her, small but real. Taza's lips curved faintly. Better. For the first time since arriving, she felt something other than shame. She felt seen. In the days that followed, Sarah began to notice more about Taza. He spoke little, but his actions carried weight. Children followed him eagerly, listening as he taught them to track animals in the dust. He treated the elders with respect, bowing his head when they spoke. And when others questioned his decision to bring her into camp, He stood firm, his voice quiet but unyielding. One night, as they sat by the fire outside her lodge, she found the courage to ask, "Why did you help me?" "You didn't have to." Taza's gaze lingered on the flames. "I saw a woman left to die. That is not honor. Not for them. Not for me." Sarah studied him, the firelight flickering across his face. He was nothing like the savage she had been warned about. There was strength in him, yes, but also honor. Dignity. "You've given me more kindness than my own people did," she murmured, thinking of the cowhands who had betrayed her. He turned to her then, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Kindness is not weakness." The words lingered in her heart long after he rose and walked away. Still, not everyone shared Taza's compassion. One morning, Sarah ventured beyond the stream. Gathering wildflowers that reminded her faintly of home, she was startled by two young warriors who blocked her path. "You do not belong here," one said sharply in broken English. "Go back to your people." Sarah's grip on her blanket tightened. "I have nowhere to go," the other warrior sneered. "Then you will bring trouble here." Fear chilled her. She stepped back, but before they could say more, Taza appeared, silent as shadow. His presence alone made the young men falter. He spoke in his tongue, his words sharp, commanding. The warriors lowered their eyes and retreated. Sarah swallowed hard. "They hate me." Taza shook his head. "They fear what they do not know." Her voice cracked. "And what do you know of me?" He studied her for a long moment, then said softly, "Enough to see your courage." The words struck deep. No one had ever called her courageous before. She had always been the obedient daughter, the dutiful settler, the woman meant to keep quiet. But in Taza's eyes, she was something more. As the moon waxed full, Sarah found herself changing. She no longer stumbled so often. She began to understand snatches of Apache speech. The women, though still wary, began to accept her small offerings, berries she gathered, water she carried without spilling. A child even placed a flower in her hand one morning, giggling before running off. But it was with Taza that she felt the greatest change. Around him, the shame and fear melted. He saw her not as a burden, but as someone worth teaching, worth protecting. One night, as they walked together beneath the silver light of the moon, Sarah felt a strange warmth in her chest. Gratitude, yes, but something more, something dangerous and sweet. She glanced at Taza, his profile sharp against the stars, and wondered if he felt it too. The days in camp became weeks, and the rhythm of Apache life wove itself around Sarah like a blanket. Strange at first, then oddly comforting. Dawn came with the sound of women grinding maize, children laughing as they raced along the stream, and the steady beat of drums when the men returned from hunts. Sarah was no longer the helpless stranger who had stumbled into their midst. She fetched water without spilling, carried wood without faltering, and even learned to weave simple mats under the guidance of one of the older women. The stares she had once endured with burning shame softened into cautious curiosity, and sometimes, though not often, into faint smiles. But through it all, it was Taza who remained her anchor. One evening, as the sun melted into crimson behind the mesas, Sarah sat with Taza near the fire. He had been showing her how to braid cord from yucca fibers, his strong fingers working quickly while hers fumbled. "You try," he said, handing her the strands. She pursed her lips, concentrating. The fibers slipped, tangled, and finally broke. She sighed, tossing them aside. "I'll never get it right." Taza chuckled softly, a sound so rare it startled her. "When I was a boy, I could not do this either. My mother struck my hands until they learned." Sarah smiled despite herself. "Then I'm grateful you are not my mother." He tilted his head, his dark eyes gleaming in the firelight. "You would not obey me anyway." The words caught her off guard. Heat rose to her cheeks, though not from the flames. She looked down quickly, pretending to fuss with the fibers, yet a strange thrill lingered in her chest, one she could not deny. That night, Sarah could not sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the lodge roof above her. Her thoughts spun around Taza, the warmth of his laughter, the steadiness of his gaze, the way his hand brushed hers when he guided her work. It was foolish, she told herself, dangerous. He was Apache. She was a settler's daughter. Their worlds had been enemies long before either of them was born, and yet, in him she saw something she had never found in her own people. Respect, honor, a gentleness that shone beneath his warrior's strength. The thought both frightened and exhilarated her. Days later, while gathering herbs near the stream, Sarah found Taza waiting. He carried no bow, no spear, only a quiet smile. "Come," he said. "I will show you something." He led her along a narrow trail that wound up the side of a mesa. The climb was steep, her skirts catching on rocks, but Taza's hand was always there to steady her. At last they reached a flat ledge overlooking the valley. The entire world seemed to spread beneath them. The camp, the silver ribbon of the stream, the desert stretching endless to the horizon. Sarah gasped softly. "It's beautiful," Taza nodded. "This is the heart of my people. My father brought me here when I was a boy. He said the land remembers us, every stone, every wind." Sarah glanced at him, seeing the pride in his face. "And now you've brought me." His eyes met hers, unreadable. "Yes." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the wind. Then, almost without thinking, Sarah reached for his hand. He did not pull away. His fingers closed gently around hers, warm and strong. Something shifted then, unspoken but undeniable. But peace was not meant to last. One afternoon, a scout returned to camp with troubling news. White soldiers had been seen nearby, riding in numbers. With them, the scout said, were 2 settlers, men Sarah recognized instantly from the description. The outlaws, the very men who had robbed her, left her to die. Her heart pounded as she listened from the edge of the gathering. The men were spreading lies, claiming she had been taken against her will, that the Apache had kidnapped her. They had twisted her humiliation into a weapon, stirring the soldiers to act. The elders murmured in anger, some glancing sharply at Sarah. She felt the weight of their stares like stones. That night she sat outside her lodge, trembling. When Taza approached, she looked up at him with fear in her eyes. "They're coming because of me," she whispered. "If I weren't here, they wouldn't have reason." Taza knelt before her, his expression fierce. "Do not blame yourself. They need no reason. They would come whether you were here or not." "But I'll make it worse," she argued. "Your people don't trust me already. What if they think I brought them?" His hand closed over hers. "I know you did not." "That is enough," her breath caught. In his voice there was no doubt, no hesitation. He believed her when no one else would. Yet tension grew in the camp. Some whispered that Sarah was a curse, that her presence invited war. Children who had once giggled at her now avoided her. Even the women turned away. Only Taza stood firm, his loyalty unwavering. One evening, as the drums of council beat low, Sarah found herself standing with him at the edge of the firelight. "You should send me away," she said bitterly. "It would be safer for everyone." Taza turned to her, his gaze steady. "Do you wish to go?" The question silenced her. Did she? She thought of the townspeople who had looked past her, the outlaws who had betrayed her, the soldiers who would call her foolish for surviving with the Apache. And then she thought of Taza, the way he had given her dignity when all else was stripped away. "No," she whispered. "I don't." Something softened in his eyes then. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent. "Then stay," he said simply. The days that followed were a storm of emotions. Sarah and Taza grew bolder in their closeness, walking together beyond the camp, sharing stories in the quiet of the night. She told him of her childhood in Missouri, of the books she loved, of the dreams she once had of teaching children. He told her of hunts with his father, of battles fought, of songs carried on the wind. Their worlds were so different, yet in those moments they felt like one. Still, shadows loomed. Scouts reported soldiers moving closer, outlaws riding at their side. War was coming. And Sarah knew then that her heart was caught between 2 fires, the love that had blossomed between her and Taza, and the hatred of 2 worlds that would not forgive them. The air in camp grew heavier with each passing day. Scouts returned with grim news. Soldiers moved through the desert, not hunting game but men. The outlaws rode with them, pointing toward the mesas where Taza's people lived. The elders gathered in council, the fire casting long shadows across their weathered faces. Sarah lingered at the edge, her stomach knotted. Though she could not understand every word, she knew enough. War was coming. An old warrior rose, his voice sharp. He gestured toward Sarah, his words cutting like knives even through the barrier of language. Others nodded, their eyes flashing with anger. "They blame me," Sarah whispered, her throat tight. Beside her, Taza's jaw hardened. He stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. He spoke at length, his tone unwavering. When he finished, the fire crackled in the silence. Some of the elders looked away, unwilling to challenge him. Others muttered, still dissatisfied. Finally, the council broke. The people scattered, leaving Sarah and Taza alone in the glow of the fire. "What did you say?" she asked softly. "That your life is mine to protect," Taza answered. "And that I will fight any who say otherwise." Sarah's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him he didn't have to risk so much for her. But the words died on her tongue. His loyalty was not something she could deny. It was something she cherished, more than she dared admit. The soldiers came at dawn. The rising sun spilled gold across the desert as the thunder of hooves shattered the stillness. The camp erupted in shouts. Warriors grabbed bows and rifles, women hurried children into hiding. Sarah's heart pounded. From the ridge she saw them. Lines of soldiers in blue, dust rising from their charge, the outlaws riding at the front. Even from a distance she recognized them, the same cruel smiles that had haunted her since the robbery. "They'll kill us all," Sarah breathed. Taza stood beside her, tall and steady. His bow was strung, a quiver of arrows at his back. "Then we fight." The first shots cracked through the air, smoke and thunder. Bullets splintered wood, tore through lodges. Warriors answered with arrows that whistled true, dropping soldiers from their saddles. Sarah crouched behind a stone, her hands trembling. She had seen guns before, but never like this, never the chaos, the screams, the fire. Her every instinct screamed to hide, to run. But then she saw Taza, his form steady as he loosed arrow after arrow, his face calm even in the storm of battle. And something within her shifted. She snatched up a fallen rifle. The wood was heavy, the metal cold, but her grip was steady. She remembered her father's hands guiding hers years ago, teaching her to shoot at fence posts for sport. Now those lessons burned like salvation. A soldier broke through the line, charging toward the camp. Sarah lifted the rifle, her breath held. She fired. The crack echoed through the canyon and the man tumbled from his horse. Her whole body shook. But when she looked up, Taza was watching her, not with surprise, but with pride. He gave a single nod, then turned back to the fight. The outlaws pressed forward with the soldiers, shouting lies as they fired into the camp. "Give us the girl," one bellowed. "She doesn't belong to you." Sarah froze. Every shot seemed aimed at her. They wanted her as their proof, their excuse. Taza stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. His voice rang out in Apache, fierce and commanding, rallying his people. Arrows flew with deadly precision, warriors striking from hidden ridges, from shadows. The camp burned, but the Apache fought with fire in their veins. In the chaos, Sarah saw him. One of the outlaws, the one who had torn the dress from her back. His sneer was unmistakable even through the smoke. Rage surged in her chest, hot and blinding. She raised the rifle, her hand steady. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but before she could fire, Taza's arrow struck. The man toppled from his horse, his cry cut short. Sarah gasped, lowering the rifle. Relief and horror tangled inside her. Taza glanced at her. "Some battles are not yours to fight." Tears burned her eyes, but she nodded. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though the sun had barely climbed in the sky. When at last the soldiers began to retreat, their numbers broken, their leader fallen, silence crept back over the camp. Smoke curled from the ruins of lodges, the ground littered with arrows and spent shells. The Apache had won, but at a price. Sarah stumbled through the wreckage, her chest tight. Women wept over fallen sons. Children clung to their mothers. Warriors stood bloodied but unbowed. Then she saw him. Taza staggered from the fight, blood streaking his arm where a bullet had grazed him. Sarah ran to him, her heart pounding. "You're hurt," she cried, reaching for him. "It is nothing," he said, though his face was pale. She tore a strip from her blanket and pressed it against the wound, her hands trembling. "Don't say that. You fought for me, for all of us. If I lost you..." Her voice broke. Taza's hand caught hers, steadying her. His eyes, dark and steady even through pain, locked on hers. "You will not lose me." The words sank deep into her soul, stronger than any vow she had ever heard. That night the camp was quiet, the fires low. The people mourned their dead, yet also celebrated survival. The soldiers had been driven back. The outlaws were no more. Sarah sat beside Taza at the edge of the firelight. His arm was bandaged, his strength slowly returning. She leaned close, her head against his shoulder. "You saved me," she whispered. He turned his head slightly, his cheek brushing her hair. "No, we saved each other." For a long time, neither spoke. The desert stretched wide and silent around them, the stars burning bright above. In that stillness, Sarah felt something stronger than fear, stronger than grief. Love, fierce, unyielding, undeniable. The desert air was still heavy with smoke when dawn crept over the horizon. The battle had ended, yet its echoes lingered in every scarred lodge and every tear shed for the fallen. Sarah rose from her mat that morning with exhaustion pressing on her bones, but she felt something else as well, a strange sense of belonging. For the first time since the robbery that had stripped her of everything, she was not thinking of escape. She was thinking of survival, not just her own, but of Taza's people, of their future, and of the man who had become her anchor in a world turned upside down. That day, the elders met once more. The council fire burned hot, its flames snapping at the dawn wind. The warriors who had survived sat in a circle, their faces solemn. Sarah lingered at the edge, her heart tight in her chest. She knew they doubted her. She knew they saw her as the spark that had brought soldiers to their door, and she feared that this time not even Taza's voice would shield her. One of the elders rose, speaking in a voice both sharp and weary. He gestured to Sarah, then to the wounded camp. She understood enough to know what he said. "She does not belong. She brings danger. Send her away." Murmurs rippled through the circle. Sarah's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, though she had no words in their tongue, only the truth that burned in her chest. Before she could speak, Taza stood. His presence filled the circle like a storm rolling across the desert. He spoke firmly, his voice carrying over the fire. His words came quick and steady like arrows loosed with precision. Sarah couldn't understand every phrase, but she understood his heart. He was fighting for her. For them. When he finished, silence fell. Then slowly the old chief nodded. His hand lifted toward Sarah, not in warmth, not in embrace, but in acceptance. The decision was made. She could stay. Relief washed over her, so sharp it made her dizzy. Yet even in that moment, she knew the battle was not over. Acceptance from the council was not love from the people. The women still turned away when she approached. The children still whispered behind their hands. To them, she would always be different. But when Taza took her hand, all the doubts and whispers faded. In his eyes, she saw the only truth that mattered. She was not alone. As the weeks passed, Sarah and Taza built something fragile but enduring. They worked side by side, she learning to grind maize, to weave baskets, to tend fires as the Apache women did. He listening to her stories of the books she once read, of the hymns she sang as a child. Their bond grew in quiet moments, when Taza taught her to ride bareback across the desert, when Sarah stitched his torn shirt with clumsy fingers, when they laughed together over the awkwardness of two worlds colliding. But it was not only laughter that bound them. It was the hard times too, the funerals they attended, the nights when soldiers' campfires glowed faintly on the horizon, reminders that danger never truly left. Through it all, their love became not a secret but a defiance. One evening, as the sun bled crimson into the sky, Taza brought Sarah to the same mesa where he had first taken her weeks ago. The valley spread wide beneath them, the desert stretching eternal. "This land," he said softly, "remembers every step we take. Someday when I am gone, it will remember me, and now it will remember you." Sarah's throat tightened. "You speak as if you expect to leave me." He shook his head. "Not leave. But I am Apache. My life will always be battle, struggle. Yours, it should not have been this way." She took his hand, her grip firm. "My life is what I choose, and I choose you, Taza. Whatever comes." His eyes softened then, the fierce warrior's mask falling away. Slowly, reverently, he pressed his forehead to hers. The desert wind curled around them, carrying the unspoken vow between their hearts. But prejudice was not so easily silenced. Months later, when word reached the nearby settlement of Sarah's survival, the townspeople whispered. Some called her a victim too foolish to return. Others spat that she was a traitor, defiled by savages. A group of riders even came to the Apache camp demanding her return. Sarah stood before them, her spine straight though her hands trembled. "I am not your prisoner," she said, her voice steady. "I am where I choose to be." The men sneered, muttered curses, and rode away. But Sarah knew the hatred behind their eyes. It would never fade. Still, when she turned, Taza was there, his hand finding hers. That was all she needed. The seasons turned. Rain fell, washing the mesas green. The heat of summer baked the desert floor until it shimmered like glass. Through every change Sarah and Taza endured, children began to smile at her. The women taught her new songs, new ways of weaving. The men, once distrustful, began to nod in greeting. Slowly, painfully, she carved a place among them, not as one of their blood, but as one of their own. Her love for Taza became a story whispered around the fire, the white woman who had been abandoned, who found dignity among enemies, who chose love in defiance of every barrier. One night, under a sky strewn thick with stars, Taza and Sarah sat by the fire. The camp was quiet, the children asleep, the elders resting. "Do you regret it?" Taza asked softly. "Staying." Sarah leaned against him, her heart steady. "No. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong. Not because of where I was born or who my people were, but because of who I love." His arm curled around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Then we belong to each other." And in that moment, Sarah knew it was true. No outlaw, no soldier, no whisper of prejudice could undo what they had built. Their love was a rebellion, a courage, a story the land itself would remember.